Hello and welcome back to another episode of a Cozy Christmas podcast. My name is Art. So today I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Roseanna White, and she is the author of our Christmas book club pick for November, Christmas at Sugar Plum Manor. It is an inspirational historical holiday romance inspired by the Nutcracker and set in Edwardian-Era England. One of our book club members, Angela, she suggested it, and I thought this would make a great cozy read, and it's a shorter read at one of the busier times of the year for many people. So I think this will be a very welcome story to read. At the time of this recording, I'm about halfway through, and I must say I am loving it. A really fun idea for a story to set it at Christmas is just the icing on the cake. Not only is the romance really fun, or the possible romance fun, but there is some political tension as well and political maneuvering happening. Not enough to overwhelm the story, but just enough to make it interesting beyond just, will they fall in love or not? So really compelling narrative. But anyway, we're going to talk all about that story. We won't give spoilers in our discussion, so we'll be careful of that. And so everyone, come on in, grab some eggnog and some sugar plums, whatever those are. And let's enjoy my interview with Roseanna M. White, author of Christmas at Sugar Plum Manor. Welcome to the Cozy Christmas podcast. I have a special guest with us today. Her name is Roseanna M. White. She is a best-selling Christie Award-winning author who has long claimed that words are the air she breathes. When she's not writing fiction, she's homeschooling her 2 kids, editing, designing book covers, and pretending her house will clean itself. And wouldn't that be a nice trick to find?
Yeah, I have a really great imagination.
Yeah, definitely. Roseanna is the author of historical novels. She writes that spies and war and mayhem always seem to find their way into her books, which is to offset her real life, which is blessedly ordinary. And Roseanna is my guest today. So thank you for joining us here on the Cozy Christmas podcast, Roseanna.
Thanks so much for having me.
We are going to be talking here in a little bit about your new Christmas novella, Christmas at Sugar Plum Manor. At the time of this interview, we haven't started reading it yet, so don't worry, there will be no spoilers. But by the time the episode comes out, we'll probably be about halfway through from what I am planning. But all that aside, welcome, and let's get to know you a little bit. You're a writer. How did you get to that point? What was your journey like to becoming an author?
Well, I'm one of those people who have always wanted to be a writer. I remember back in first grade when my teacher assigned us write a short story, and it was that was it. I was done. That was it. I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life was just write stories. So I wrote all through primary school and middle school. I actually wrote my first book in middle school. It was brilliant. Yeah. No edits needed. But actually a rewrite of that became The Lost Heiress, which is my best-selling book 20 years later, and several books that were published beforehand. But that's still a fun story. So I just kept working at it. I kept writing all through high school, all through college, and then started pursuing publication seriously. So it took a good long time and a lot of rejections, but we just kept collecting them until someone finally said yes. And so my first books came out in 2009. And at this point, it'll be 40 of the ones that are contracted written. There are 40. So, yep.
All right. That's a dream come true for you then.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Along the way, what were some of the challenges you faced and overcame, and where did you find joy in that process too?
Yeah, so it's a hard industry to break into. And I wanted to go the traditional route and be published by a publisher. I didn't really want to do it all myself, especially in 2009. Kindle was just getting started. So my husband and I actually started a small press because he was interested in the publishing end of things. So we started with my own books, but even while we were publishing my books and then publishing other people's books, I was still pursuing those relationships with other publishers. So it was a lot of go to conferences, meet people, make connections, send emails, be really friendly, get an agent. The agent started sending things out, still getting rejections. And it was a whole lot of like just missing what people were wanting. Like I was writing historicals, they wanted contemporary. Okay, I wrote a contemporary. Well, now they want a historical. So what really paid off though was just building relationships. So I met a lot of people at conferences, and some of them became very dear friends, and some were editors, and some were agents, and a lot were just other authors. But it got to the point where I could say, "Hey, what are you guys looking for?" And it actually, my big break came when an editor said, "Hey, you write historical too, right? How about you send us something like this?" And that was the one that they ended up buying. So it was just a lot of sticking to the dream and realizing that much like if I wanted to be a doctor, I had to put in the time, I had to put in the years and the effort. And it was something I could never give up on because it's so much a part of me. Words and writing and books are just who I am. So giving up was never really an option. It was more, okay, let's learn, let's keep learning, let's keep getting better, let's learn what the industry wants and what the readers want and figure out how I can meet that and meet it in a way that it still appeals to my first love. So I was very happy when I did land with historicals because that was my first love and got to write them. And so it's been a lot of hard work, and a lot of learning to balance writing books and publishing books with homeschooling kids and working from home and my husband working from home. So there's always a lot going on, but it's just been a real joy, especially once books started getting out there and I start hearing from readers and realizing that this thing matters, right? Like the words I write impact people, and that's always what my prayer has been for my writing. So it's a real blessing to be able to live the dream.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then as I read in your bio, you were won a Christie Award. That's got to be really satisfying. That's for those who don't know, that's a major award in the religious fiction,
Yeah.
if I remember right. Yeah. I didn't happen to look, but what did you win that for?
So I've been nominated several times. The one that won was for a book called A Portrait of Loyalty, which is the third book in a series. So I didn't even expect it to be nominated, honestly. But ironically, it was about the Spanish flu in, the end of World War One, and it happened to come out right in the height of COVID. And I was like,
There
go
you go.
figure. That's what it takes to win an award, I guess. So definitely not.
Yeah.
The timing was not planned. Obviously, it was already written and turned in before the pandemic hit. But definitely one of those things of, oh, that was interesting timing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we were definitely looking for anything to entertain us then. So, yeah, well, that's got to be satisfying obviously we don't, I assume you don't do it for the accolades and the awards and all that, but it sure is nice.
It's a very nice feeling, and it was fun
Yeah.
because it was COVID. It was online, and it was the first time it was online
Mm.
in that way, like live. So my daughter and I were sitting and watching it. I'm all dressed up, but with fuzzy slippers on at home.
Uh-huh.
And the way that they announce the award is that they read the first line, the first sentence of the book. So I was a bit taken aback though, because when they started reading it, they read the first line of chapter one, but I had a prologue in there, and that's what I had in my head that they would read if I won. So at first I'm like, oh, that's not my line. Wait, those are my characters. So it took me a minute, but it was fun.
Oh, great. Great. Yeah. I have long said that I was really interested to see what kind of creative things would come out of the pandemic, the stories, the novels, the movies, whatever, because we were all, at that time just kind of sequestered away. And that's how I started podcasting. And I've had a chance to interview writers who said, oh, I wrote this during the pandemic. And I assume your story was probably written before all that happened, but you can at least claim something good came out of that year. So
yeah, we joked that we scarcely noticed the pandemic because my husband and I both work from home and we homeschool our kids, so nothing
Right.
changed.
Now, how do you balance homeschooling with a writing career?
It requires a lot of self-discipline and a pretty rigorous schedule. So I'm a morning person, so I would get up at 5:30 and write from 5:30 to 7:30, and then we would get breakfast and shower, exercise, whatever. Um, and then at 9 o'clock, school would start, and we did a literature-based program. So there was a lot of read aloud. So I would read to the kids for however long it took, an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours their independent work, and I would get back to my work. I'm also a cover designer and typesetter and help run the publishing company that we own. So that's when I would do the design work. And in the afternoons, we would come back together for more subjects that we did together, like science. And then again, they would have some independent time, and I would do the other work, any work that needed to be done. And the thing is that after a while, it became so much a routine that it didn't really even matter from one year to the next because we were always doing the same curriculum, just moving into the next level of it. So it was like an unbroken routine, even though we took summers off. Um, it was it was just kind of getting back into the normal thing. So
Hmm.
after enough years, it's just second nature.
Yep. Yep. Um, if I ever learn to be disciplined enough to have a schedule, no, there'll be no stopping me. uh, well, speaking of cover design, let's talk about your book that we're going to be reading. First of all, breathtakingly beautiful cover. Is that your design or somebody
No, no,
else's?
I don't design my own covers for Bethany House Books. They have an in-house designer who does them. So this was definitely one where they sent me, and they unintentionally sent me two. One with her dress being the red that it is, and one with
Mhm.
it being a dark plum. And they didn't mean to send me the purple one because they had already decided on the red for the Christmas story. But I
Yeah.
was happy with that because that was what I wanted to. I was like, yes, Christmas all the way. So.
Right. Yeah. That's what um, struck me first or caught my attention first was the cover. So well done
Yeah, they did a
to
great
Bethany
job. They
House.
just
Yeah.
nailed holiday historical romance. Like it's just
Yeah.
what it says.
Exactly. Right. Uh, so let's talk a little bit about the story. And like I said, we'll keep it to the first couple of chapters or so, just because everyone reads at a different rate here, and I don't want to give any spoilers away. Um, Give us a nutshell. What's the story about, and what can we expect?
Sure. So it's based on the Nutcracker. And rather than basing it on the ballet, which is what I was most familiar with, because my daughter danced in the Nutcracker for every year of childhood until the studio eventually sadly closed when she was like 15. So we had a solid 10 years of Nutcracker in our family. So when I was asked to write a Christmas story set in the Edwardian era, it didn't take me long to be like, how about something Nutcracker inspired? So rather than base it on the ballet, I wanted to base it on the original short story, which has more of a backstory of why the Nutcracker Prince and the Mouse King are at war. So I decided to involve some of those elements in the story. So the story is set in 1902 England. It's actually set in one of England's postcard villages. So it's Castleton, which was actually so picturesque that they put it on Christmas cards, even back then. So I was like, okay, that'll be so fun, right? So we have our Marie or Clara character, who is Lady Mariah, and we have our Nutcracker character, who is Cyril. In my version, she is the stepdaughter of an earl who has this lovely estate, Plumford Manor. Um, and he has no biological children, which means that he had to go way back in family history to try to find his heir to see who would inherit the earldom. And that would be Cyril. But Mariah loves this place. This is the only home she's ever known, the only one she remembers. And she really wants to stay here, but doesn't have that option in Edwardian England. She has no claim on anything. It will all go to Cyril. And she and Cyril used to be friends, but that was when they were kids, and she hasn't seen him in years. And then she hears that he's been courting this horrible young woman that she absolutely despises. So she's like, this guy has no taste. So it's over, right? Like, we'll be friends, but that's it. But Cyril comes he just is trying to find his own story. He's trying to find, how can I be a hero? How can I live up to this thing I don't feel like I deserve? So he's kind of seeking the whole time, what can I do to really deserve this life that I've been given for no good reason? And he has some shadows in his past. And then we have our Mouse King character. We have to have a kind of villain in the story.
Mhm.
So in this, it's a Danish lord. His name is Zoran Gildencrone, who is in England for the express purpose of finding an English bride for political reasons, to kind of shore up relations between England and Denmark. In my very fictional story, he is a fictional relative of the ruling monarch in Denmark, and the monarchy has promised him that if he finds this English bride and they have children, then one of their children will marry into the royal family. So he's armed not only with his own title, but with the promise of your child will be a monarch in Denmark, which, you know, in English noble society, this is a pretty huge deal.
Great.
So he's on the scene trying to win Mariah's hand for not quite, you know, romantic reasons. He doesn't really care whether she's nice or not, you know, he just is there for political reasons. And we have Cyril trying to find his own story, and we have Mariah searching for a way to maintain what she loves, and also asking herself the question of, do I need to let go of all I am and of all I love in order to be successful in the world? So her family's pressuring her to let go of all these whimsical, childish dreams of yours and, you know, be realistic. So it's a story of whimsy. It's a story that's ever so much fun. And it's a story where absolutely every character ends up blissfully happy in the end. Because my editor said, no spies and war and mayhem in this one. It has to be happy and Christmassy. So there we go.
Okay, good. Good. So this sounds like a great book to read over Christmas time. Do you set a lot of your books at the Edwardian time or
Yeah, a lot of them were set in Edwardian England up through World War One. So quite a few. 3 series, I think, at least, were set in that era, maybe 4. So I'm very familiar with it. Yeah.
is there a certain appeal of that time period that draws you to it, or is it just where you happen to find yourself?
A little bit of both. It started when the Downton Abbey craze was big.
Sure.
My agent actually asked me if I had anything that was set in Edwardian England, and I didn't, but I could. So I took one, again, a rewrite of my very first book, which was originally Victorian England, and I reset it to be an Edwardian England, and that got picked up by Bethany House, and they wanted me to stay in that era, so I did. And the more I wrote in it and the more I learned, the more comfortable I became, and the more I just really came to love that this was an era when what we associate with historical settings started to morph into what we associate with modern settings. So you still have horses and carriages, but you also have cars. You have electricity, but it was a little unreliable. And they also still had, you know, lanterns and candles and all that stuff. So it was just this beautiful kind of clash of modern society and historical society. And I loved what that meant for the people involved, that they're on the cusp of something new.
Yeah, yeah. And for fans of Downton Abbey, we don't like automobiles anymore. So but that's a whole other conversation. You're familiar with the time period? Did you do research about like Christmas traditions and things to really get it, you know, get the setting right? And what did you find about how they celebrated Christmas versus how we do it?
Yeah, so a lot of it was very similar to how it is today, because the big changes came in the Victorian era when Victoria married Albert, who was German, and he brought with him the German Christmas traditions. And that's when things like Christmas trees really began to be popular, and putting gifts in the tree or under the tree. So those things that we associate so much with Christmas were already very well established by the Edwardian era in 1902. So a lot of that was just already in place, and that was fun. But a lot of things are also have shifted over the years. Like at that point in time, you probably would have had a large party on Christmas Eve. A lot of times you would open presents on Christmas Eve, because Christmas morning you'd be in church, and that's what everybody did. This was not optional. You could go to the midnight mass, or you could go to one of the early services on Christmas Day, but there was no sleeping in or getting up and opening your presents and then having breakfast. You went to church. Like that was what you did. So it was fun to kind of say, okay, well, we're going to look at this family that's has a lot of very similar traditions, but they're also going to have some different priorities on where they're spending their time. So I did enjoy having a Christmas play being put on. Mariah helps the village children write a Christmas play that's performed both before the book starts and then in the course of the story. So there's that sort of thing that's still traditional, but they also didn't have all of the fake greenery that we have these days. So when I want to hang up my Christmas greenery, I go get it out of the tub and put it up and,
Right.
have my lovely mistletoe and stuff like that. But they actually brought in greenery from the forest. So we have a wagon loaded down with trees and boughs that would be used to make wreaths and stuff in the beginning of the story. And that's just a kind of fun, like picturesque. You can just picture the wagons and sleighs with all these Christmas trees and stuff on them, which is fun. And sleighs, very romantic idea that we just don't have very much anymore, at least not where I live, maybe in some places, but we don't get quite enough snow to break sleighs out here regularly.
No, unfortunately, I live in Iowa, and where I live, at least the last, I don't know, handful of years, the snow has been starting later and later into January, and by then I'm ready for winter to be done, and I want spring.
Right.
It's like, why are we starting this now?
Yep, I agree.
Do you have plans to write anything more Christmas related, or is this kind of a one-shot thing for you?
Oh, I definitely have some more on the horizon. I will be writing one. I'll be writing it this holiday season. I'm not exactly sure when it'll be coming out. If it'll be next year, it'll probably be next year, for Tyndale House. And it's going to be about the Icelandic tradition of Jala Bókaflóð, which is the Christmas book flood, which I know a lot of people in the bookish community know and love. Some people still don't know what it is. So just to educate those who might not know yet, the people in Iceland have a tradition of giving books as Christmas gifts, and they open them on Christmas Eve, and then they stay up through midnight reading the books so that they welcome in Christmas Day in a literary fashion. And I just love this. So my family has adopted it too. We always give books for Christmas, and we always stay up reading them, and super fun. So the tradition actually began at the end of World War II. Because paper was one of the only things not rationed in Iceland. So books were one of the only things still in abundance at the end of the war. So the publishers decided, hey, let's capitalize on this, basically. So they put out this giant catalog of all the books available, and that's what people gave for Christmas that year in 1945. So it became a tradition, and now every year still, all the publishers will put out a joint catalog of all the books available, and that's when most of the books sold in Iceland are sold, is in the weeks leading up to Christmas. And Iceland also still has one of the highest rates of people who read books in all the world. They're a very small population, but they are readers. So I think in America, it's something like 30% of people read at least one book a year. And in Iceland, it's 70% of people read at least one book a year.
Oh, wow.
So.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I did an episode on that a couple of years ago now. Might have been in January because I was feeling depressed, so I needed to talk about something fun. But that sounds like an amazing tradition, and it's something my wife and I have thought about doing once our kids are out of the house. Because right now, it's really chaotic. What are we going to do when we're empty nesters, for Christmas? And we have different places we might have to travel and see kids and grown-up kids and all that. And like, well, we could just spend Christmas Eve reading and eating chocolate all day. That
sounds great, right?
I know, yeah.
Luckily, at least we have two kids. My daughter is a reader, and my son is not. So he'll play video games until the Christmas Day, and the rest of us will sit on the couch reading.
Sure, yeah. That's definitely a tradition we're going to have to explore more. And we do make a point to gift at least one book to each member of our family. For a while, we were a little more strict on that. Like my wife had this, she was organized. She had these different categories she was going to gift in, and there'd always be a book included. And that's we've kind of strayed away from that a bit now as they're getting older. But I think last year on my Christmas wish list, it was just nothing but books. And
that's what mine is this year.
Yeah.
Nothing but books.
You know what? I've got a job. I can buy what I want. Here. If you want to buy me stuff, here's a list of books.
Yep. Next year's books.
Right. Yeah. So, but yeah, I love reading, and I read all kinds of genres and things, but reading at Christmas time, especially reading Christmas books at Christmas time, to me, there's just nothing better. Curl up with Christmas Carol again for the 30th time or whatever. It's good. Oh, well, all right. Well, let's kind of since we're already touching on the subject, but let's really dive into Christmas here and talk about some of your favorite traditions and memories. We've already talked about how you love to read and read in and welcome Christmas with an open book. What other things do you guys do to celebrate Christmas?
Well, we are a family that likes to have a real tree. So we do get to
Mhm.
go on the great Christmas tree hunt every year. And this is getting harder and harder because a lot of Christmas tree farms are shutting down around where we are. So there are fewer and fewer places to go. And sometimes it is a real exploration. Like we have tried multiple farms some years to try to find what we want. So we like a blue spruce, and those no one has them. So there's always a great Christmas tree hunt, and then it's funny how over the years the kids have taken on different roles in our Christmas decorating. Like my son, who is now 16, helps me rearrange the furniture to bring the Christmas tree in. But once the tree's in, it's like he's done. He doesn't want to help decorate it. That's where my daughter comes in. She's 19 now.
Mhm.
So she loves to help me decorate both the house and the tree. And my husband likes to just come out and see it all done. And then he's like, let's leave it up forever.
Yeah,
He
there you
doesn't
go.
like to be the one putting it up, but definitely loves seeing it. And another fun day is always gingerbread cookie day. Both of my
Mm.
kids name gingerbread cookies as their favorite Christmas cookies.
Mhm.
And making and decorating these cookies is always one thing they really look forward to. Like, I'll be like, oh, we'll get around to it sometime. They're like, no, let's plan. When are we doing the gingerbread cookies? So we used to do a bunch of different shapes. We would do Christmas trees and stars and, men and Santa hats and any cookie cutter I had in my possession. But 4 years ago, my son was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, which means he has to dose for all the carbs he eats. So in order to dose accurately, we started making one shape of Christmas cookie, and it's the gingerbread men. But even that is tons of fun. We make red, green, and white icing and decorate them. So we have everything from Santa to Hawaiian shirts and sunglasses, and some are girls, and sometimes the heads go funny, so they're aliens, and we make them all green, and the imagination definitely runs wild. So yeah, lots of that.
Yeah, that's great. I also love gingerbread cookies. I the last couple of years, those have been my favorite, and that's changed. I don't know why. Maybe as I get older, your taste change, but it's I just crave them. I see already talking about them now. I'm like, oh, I need gingerbread. You could get really creative with them. I don't know if you guys are Star Wars fans. One of the TV shows that came out, there was a little character that looks like a little baby Yoda. You can make that out of an angel gingerbread shape. You basically just break the head off, and then color the top part green,
But
and
it's
so
ears, yeah.
it's got the ears, and yeah, for the wings it's the ears. And we did that. I think it was the first year the Mandalorian was out, and my boys thought this was the funniest thing ever. Like, this is awesome. And I think they really like just breaking the heads off the the angels.
Probably, yeah. Eating a gingerbread man is always like, oh, do I eat his head first so he can't feel the pain, or do I eat his legs so he can't run away?
That's right. And here's the mayhem that's in your life, right?
Yep, exactly.
Right. But yeah, gingerbread cookies are definitely the best. My wife likes to make a whole bunch of different types, and we've had to cut back a little bit. I don't burn through food like I used to, so.
Right. That's when you get older. It's like, oh man, I
I
can't eat
know.
all the cookies anymore.
Right. But we do have a couple of days where she does a lot of baking, and then we'll have all these cookies in time for Christmas. And we like to share them with neighbors and friends and people in our church and different things. So we don't eat them all. I do think, though, in 2020, we ended up eating most of them. Just, as the tail end of the pandemic there, we just thought, you know what, these cookies are ours.
Yep. Yeah. Luckily, cookies freeze well too, so you can always put some of each batch in the freezer and bring them out later.
We haven't tried that yet. Maybe that's a good idea. What are some of the ways that you celebrate Christmas that help bring meaning to the holiday for you?
This is something our family has talked about a lot. I grew up in a family where you get up at way before the crack of dawn on Christmas morning, right? Like 5:30, and you open presents, and the whole family comes over for breakfast. Probably did a church service on Christmas Eve. But the focus was very much on let's open gifts and then spend the day with family opening more gifts. And when my husband joined the family, he's like, I hate this emphasis on gifts. Like, that's not what Christmas is about. We need to de-emphasize gifts. So the first several years of our family, and when we started having kids, was a lot of experimentation of, okay, how do we preserve the true meaning of Christmas while still doing all the family stuff? How do we make it meaningful for us? What we eventually, it took quite a while, what we eventually settled on was we were going to do our presents on Christmas Eve. So we do our church service, we come home, we open presents, we read the books until midnight, and we go to bed. And then when we wake up on Christmas Day, we can focus on what the day really means. And so we often have started with reading the Bible story, or even, turning on Christmas music, singing the songs, and just kind of relaxing in the morning before we go to my family's house and have the big brouhaha with all the family and the breakfast and all that. And so there are more presents, and it's still more than my husband is comfortable with, but it's also a lot of just hanging out with the family and being together. And then we usually abandon them and come back home and have a nice quiet evening and put a fire in the fireplace and just kind of relax again, while they probably go and do another Christmas dinner. But we usually do that on Christmas Eve as well. So it's a lot of going about, of course, but it's also taking deliberate time to be home with, our smaller family, not the extended family, and just focus on, what the meaning of Christmas is, and, what Christ coming into the world means to us, and how we can incorporate that into our lives.
Yeah, it's hard with kids, I found out, especially when they're younger, because so much of the culture and things around Christmas are presents,
Mm-hmm.
and our kids really at times struggled with that. And not that they're bad kids. I mean, it's normal. I mean, I gotta admit, I love getting presents still. Somebody told me once that, oh, Christmas is really just for kids and you don't get presents anymore as an adult. And I'm like, yeah, you do. You better. Anyway, my greed aside here, and my wife was always really good at helping them think beyond themselves. Let's look at the angel tree, see who we can buy a present for, or
Yep.
How can we be a blessing to our neighbors or our church family, things like that help teach sharing, and thinking beyond yourself, which had its, I don't want to sound like we were the perfect family. There were times where it worked and times it didn't. I can recall my daughter picking out a gift it was an angel tree gift, and it was a dolly, and she was crying hysterically because it wasn't going to be for her. She just really wanted it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, she was very young at that time. It was like she was like 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere in that age range. But she, however, has learned and is a very generous 15-year-old now. So I'm very happy to see that. But
Yeah.
At the time you're thinking, am I raising a monster?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. When we were, gosh, I guess it was like maybe 2014. It was probably about 10 years ago. I was getting so fed up with the whole Santa thing, and we did Santa, but it seemed like everything on television was focused on Santa and presents. And of course, the kids are watching cartoons constantly, so this is what they're seeing. And I was so frustrated that I was about ready to pull the plug and say, we're done with all this presents junk and all the Santa stuff, and we're just gonna, and I didn't want to do that. So I was like, okay, here's what we're actually gonna do. We're gonna look up the history of Santa Claus. And being a homeschool family, they're used to hearing, we're gonna look up and learn about. So we researched St. Nicholas and learned that he was a saint. First of all, he was a miracle worker. He healed people. He was, so many miracles were attributed to him. But a lot of our traditions today are actually from the original St. Nicholas tradition, when he rescued people. And one of the stories, and why we have both gifts in stockings and there's an old tradition of gold in stockings, was because there were these 3 girls who lived in his hometown who their father lost his fortune, and he was going to sell them into prostitution because without a dowry, there's not a whole lot of other option at that point in history. And Nicholas had family wealth, and he anonymously tossed gold into their window. First one night for the eldest daughter, the next night he came back and tossed more in for the second eldest, and then they were watching for him, and he wanted to remain anonymous, so he climbed up on the roof and threw it down the chimney. So gold flew down the chimney, bounced off, and landed in the stockings that they had left, or the shoes that they had left drying by the fire. So I just loved that tradition. And I was like, oh, that's where that comes from. And I love the idea that the tradition of giving gifts was from St. Nicholas, because he gave anonymously, but with, total generosity. And all the stories of what he had done stayed secret until his death. And then people started talking about how all these things he had done. So it became tradition when you wanted to give a gift anonymously that you would sign it from St. Nicholas. So especially around his feast day, which is December 6th, people would give presents and write that they were from St. Nicholas. But over the years, being so close to Christmas, the traditions just merged. So St. Nicholas started giving gifts on Christmas instead of St. Nicholas Day. So my kids were like, well, that's really awesome. So when we would talk about Santa, it's not a magical elf, right? It's a saint. It's somebody who gave generously and anonymously. So how are you going to do that in your life? So then the kids would start deciding who they would be St. Nicholas for. And when presents showed up from St. Nicholas or from Santa, they would say, who really gave it to me? But we'd never tell them who it was. They eventually figured out it was all us. It was all mom and dad. But for a few years there, though, they were like, was it this grandmother? Was it this aunt? Was it this cousin? And they had no idea. So it strangely put some magic back in Christmas to take some of the magic out of Christmas and show them that you have to be the one who gives generously, and you have to trust the people you love to give generously. And this is how we keep these traditions alive.
We homeschooled our kids for a while as well. And until like my oldest got into high school, he just wanted math we didn't know how to teach. So, but anyway, well, he was probably kindergarten, first, second grade in there. Kind of that same thing, is Santa real? Is he not? What's going on with this? And so I thought it'd be a good dad, and teach him about a little bit about St. Nicholas and all that, like you did. And his takeaway from that was, oh, Santa Claus is dead. And so he was telling kids, Santa Claus is dead. He's not coming at Christmas. He's dead. And so I'm like, no, Ryan, stop. No, you got it wrong. Let's try this again. And then he went through a period a couple years later where he thought Santa was real, and we were lying to him about him not being real, and like kind of getting the wrong lesson we're trying to teach him. I don't know. He was sure for a while there, because all the movies you'd see, like you're saying, the parents were the ones who didn't believe, but the kids did, and they could see Santa and all that. So he went through that stage, but it was fun. We look back at that now, and we really laugh over how that all happened. But it's spite of your best efforts. Sometimes it has humorous side effects.
It does indeed. But I love that it's always the instinct of kids to believe.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to something in the human spirit that we all too often push aside, but I think it's a crucial part of us.
Just, from belief in God to a belief in hope that tomorrow's going to be a better day, that whatever trial you're going through now will come to an end, and better days are ahead. There's just a lot about that unwavering hope we can learn from our children. Absolutely. And I think that's something worth celebrating personally. So, well, how about Christmas music? Are you guys big in music? And what are some of your favorite carols or songs?
Yeah, I do love Christmas music. My favorite is kind of the like 30s and 40s style. So I love swing music in general. And then when you combine that with Christmas, you just get fantastic stuff, like all the Bing Crosby Christmas stuff, and there's just so much of it. So I'm not a huge fan of the like super modern Christmas music, but the traditional music, we turn on Christmas traditions. We have Sirius XM. So as soon as it's on, we're like, all right, time for the Christmas music. And yeah, I just love it when it's the traditional stuff or up into, the 50s or 60s or so. Always makes me smile. The only thing that annoys me is that channel goes away on like December 26th. And I'm like, no, this is Christmas Day too. You're not allowed to end it until January.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that bugs me. The radio station will play Christmas music, and midnight on Christmas night, it stops.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
guys, come on, come on.
We are definitely a 12 days of Christmas family. Like we celebrate from Christmas until January 6th. That's our Christmas.
That's right. Now, when do you guys start decorating? Is it before or after Thanksgiving, or?
It's usually around Thanksgiving. All of my Christmas decorations and my Christmas tree decorations are stored together. So being that we get a real tree, we have to do that when the tree farms are open, which is
Mm.
usually the weekend after Christmas or after New Year. Thanksgiving, that's the holiday.
Yep.
The weekend after Thanksgiving and then the following weekend. So we have that option. We can go one of those 2 weekends and get our tree, and that's when all the decorating happens.
Yeah. We have a fake tree, which means we can have some flexibility when it goes up. I'm pushing to get it out a little bit earlier, but I don't think I'm going to win that argument. But usually it's the Friday after Thanksgiving, the next day we will decorate the tree and everything. But I did get my outside lights up already. We've had some nice weather, so I thought might as well just put them up now. And
No.
we actually had several of the houses on our block. It was overnight. Their Halloween, then it was by like November 2nd, their Christmas lights are out. I can see one house already has their tree up, and I'm like, oh, well, this is nice. All right. So I got my lights out, and I didn't feel so bad leaving them on now.
Nope, that works.
Yeah. I've heard with a real tree too, you don't want to put up the real tree too early because it could kind of dry out and die and before Christmas happens. So
it hasn't been so bad when we've gone to the farm to get it. Now, when we bought a pre-cut one, you don't know how long it's been cut and sitting there. Those we tended to lose the needles pretty quickly. But the last few years, they've been lasting easily to January 6th. Sometimes even beyond. We just let it go as long as it holds on.
There you are. That's an interesting tip there. I didn't realize there would be a difference, but that does make sense. He knows how long that poor tree's been sitting there in the parking lot.
Yeah, and it's not in water. When we cut it, we bring it home, we put it in water, and it stays pretty healthy then.
But yeah, I think a Christmas tree is one of my favorite decorations. If I had to forego any other decorations, as long as I could have my tree up, I'd be good to go.
Yeah, we love it with the lights and just, turn all the other lights down and just sit there with the Christmas tree and its lights. Yeah, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. Now, do you do colored lights or white lights or?
When my husband and I got married, my mother-in-law gave us these lights that were red, purple, and gold. And so those are the ones we used on our tree for years until they started dying. And then we tried to replace them, and there was only one place that made them, and then they stopped making them. So just like 2 years ago, I was unable to get the actual lights. So I had to buy gold lights and red lights and purple lights, and we put white lights on it too. So they are colored, but they're not all colors. They're just those 3 colors. And for whatever reason, that's just what we love because we're used to it, I'm sure, because it's our tradition. So yeah.
Yeah. Growing up, we had the multicolor lights on, and that's what I was just used to. And I always thought, oh, the white lights, that's boring. It's just white lights. But then my wife, that was her favorite. And so we thought, okay, we'll compromise, one year I'll do my way. Then next year we'll do her way. But when I got the white lights on the tree, I thought, man, this is actually really beautiful. So for the most part, we've had white lights on. So I joked that we compromised and did it her way, but the truth is I really like just the white with the green. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, my mom is taken to doing she'll do a turquoise tree and everything will be in shades of blue and green, and she'll do a patriotic tree and it'll be red, white, and blue. Whereas I inherited a bunch of vintage ornaments from my grandmother when she downsized. So I have all these classic, really old, probably from the 40s or 50s Christmas ornaments. So they're in all colors. So that's what I do, and I love it. So yeah, we're a hodgepodge tree.
I've talked about this before on the podcast, but our Christmas tree really becomes like a scrapbook of our family history, which I've really grown to like that. And there's always a few tears when we're putting out ornaments because of the memories we're reminded of.
Exactly. Yeah. My mother-in-law has taken my kids to get an ornament every year, and they got to pick it out. So we have, the Pac-Man ornament and the rhinoceros ornament and the fox ornament, whatever they were into at that point in time. So And they always put them on their side of the tree. Zoe takes the left and Rowan takes
Mhm.
the right. And so whenever we're putting the ornaments on, it's definitely a walk down memory lane of, oh, look, here's the dinosaur stage. Here's the motorcycle stage.
Uh-huh. We have some ornaments that have pictures of the kids in them. And for a while, where my easy chair was right next to the tree. And so my oldest son would hang all these ornaments of his picture all in a clump, so they would be looking at me as I sat in my chair. He's like, I don't want you to forget about me, Dad, Like, well, I'll never do that. So yeah, this year I'm pretty sure the plan is we'll decorate on the Friday after Thanksgiving. My son is engaged to be married, so he and his fiancée are coming to help decorate again. And I'm excited for them because they're going to be starting their own traditions here soon, and starting their own family and all that. And every year, those times together get more and more precious. Well, before we talk the rest of the afternoon away here, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your writing journey and talking about Christmas. Do you have anything coming out here in the new year that you'd like to promote or let us know about?
Absolutely. So I guess my next ones are in the spring and summer. I have a beach book coming out called The Island Bookshop, which is a dual time story set in modern day and also the 1930s in Avon, North Carolina, in the Outer Banks. Then I have my first fantasy, which will be coming out in June, called Awakened, and it's got mermaids and all sorts of fun stuff. And then my next historical is called The Collector of Burned Books. That'll be coming from Tyndale on July 15th, and it's World War II Paris. So it's set around an actual historical library that was founded by German expatriates that had all the books that Nazi Germany had banned and burned in it. So it's got some espionage and lots of bookish themes and a lot just about how books and words are linked so closely to freedom and what happens when that is taken away.
Oh, that sounds like a book I'd really be interested in. That's a passionate topic of mine.
Mine too.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, you're writing about it. I would hope so.
Yeah,
No.
Clearly.
But no, yeah, absolutely. There's power in words and being able to read, and it is a gift, and I am grateful for it. Yeah. Can you go ahead and share your website, and where can folks find you online? I know you've got a very active website.
Yes, I do. So if you go to roseannamwhite.com, that's where everything lives. And you can sign up for my newsletter. I send it out every week. I blog twice every week. I have a shop full of all sorts of bookish things, some pertaining to my books, some just generally for book lovers. And yeah, I sell signed copies of my books. You can find me at all the major social media sites at Roseanna M. White. So it's consistent on all the sites, easy to find.
All right. Very good. And I'll have links in the show notes for everyone. So be sure to check there if you can't remember what she just said. So
if you need to know how to spell my name.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Roseanna, thanks for coming on. And I hope you and your family have a Merry Christmas.
Thanks. I hope you do too.
Thank you for listening today to my interview with Roseanna White. You will find links to her books in the show notes, as well as some other ways you can help support the podcast. Your donations have been so helpful to me this year to be able to upgrade some things and keep plugging away at what I'm doing. So I appreciate it greatly. For a donation on Ko-fi.com, I'll send you a Christmas card and a bookmark or sticker. Thank you for listening. I hope you all take care and are having a wonderful Christmas season. And so until next time, let's remember to honor Christmas in our heart and try to keep it all the year. Have a very Merry Christmas.